Hi, this is Graphically Alex coming at you with all things fat related. If that's something that interests you, please subscribe. I'd love to have you. Today we are going to be watching a TikTok about how being fat is a political statement or staying fat, which I think is horrible. I think it's a horrible thing to say. I will just say that to start out with. I think it's awful to encourage people to have poor health for the sake of a political statement that is likely not worth it. I'll put it to you that way. Let's go ahead and listen to her entire take, and then I will break it down piece by piece. It's a little bit long. It's about 3 minutes. I haven't heard it yet.
I genuinely believe that in this glorious year of 2025, it is borderline radical and at the very least an embodied political statement to be fat, chubby, plus-sized, curvaceous, whatever you want to call it. Now, of course, I recognize that most people that are fat, they're not doing that with intention or purpose. They simply are. In the same way that I have brown hair, they are fat. They simply exist in their bodies as anyone else does. And I know people are going to be like, okay, Chloe, you need to log off Twitter. This is not a crazy thing to say, especially with the influx of pro-Anna, pro-ED, you must be skinny, you must be thin content, media, narratives that are being shoved down our throat within our culture right now in 2025. If I go on my Instagram Explore page on an account that I use frequently, where I want to look at memes and stuff about movies and stuff that I genuinely enjoy, my Explore page, no matter what I do, is full of people that I will never look like. And it's the same thing on the accounts that I don't use. The idea of being thin is being sold to all of us in one way or another. And so I say that being fat, for example, is an embodied political statement because you are living resistance against the culture, against this idea that to be valued, to be beautiful, to be seen, to be treated like a normal human being, you must look a certain way. I also want to remind people that your body keeps the score. If you are losing weight in a way that is unhealthy and unnatural to you, it's not just your body itself that is going to suffer, but your brain, your mind, your mental health, your ability to function as a person, as a friend, as a loved one. And I emphasize this last point because when you convince women that they have to lose weight, that doesn't just impact their self-esteem. When you tell them that they have to take up less space, they literally do take up less space. And what do I mean by that? It won't just make your body and mind weaker. It'll make you weaker as a whole. It'll prevent you from reaching your fullest potential. It'll keep you still. It will demobilize you. It will make you more vulnerable. If you can only focus on your own vanity and you're malnourished, you can't really do much to defend yourself, can you? And just another reminder, there's a reason why mental illness. You should strive to be healthy and strong. And yes, there are plenty of women that are naturally thin. I know that. But if that's not the case for you, don't harm yourself trying to look like that. Whip out your woke card. Stay fat, princess. I genuinely believe.
All right, that was one of the worst things I've heard in a very long time. I'm kind of appalled, to be honest. I think that I don't even know if that was toxic ritualistic reinforcement or if it was some borderline psychotic thing, like a rant. I think that it's also very important to point out that she isn't big. She doesn't have any stake in this. She's not going to suffer because other people are bigger than her. I think that it's really cruel to do that type of thing. I think there was definitely some aspects of toxic ritualistic reinforcement, like especially this idea that in order to downsize, the only other way is to be overly reductive, if you catch my drift. That's something that she was really honing in on that I don't think is true whatsoever. It's just not. I think that her idea of what is toxic content is just women who are in shape, which is really weird. I'm just going to put it to you that way. It's very strange to consider that to be a toxic thing. But let's go ahead and break it down piece by piece.
That in this glorious year of 2025, it is borderline radical and at the very least an embodied political statement to be fat, chubby, plus-sized, curvaceous, whatever you want to call it. Now, of course...
So this is wrong. I have told you guys many, many times this is wrong pretty much from the roots of it, from the core of it, all the way down. There is no correlation between fatness and belief. Therefore, being fat doesn't have anything to do with your politics. It doesn't have anything to do with what you believe in. You will find people across all of the aisles of politics. You will find people that are fat that believe in anything and everything. It has no correlation. Zero. So to try to say that every single fat person is making a political statement, or I guess every single fat woman is making a political statement, even if she blatantly doesn't believe in it, that's kind of taking away a woman's agency, a woman's ability to believe in what she chooses to. It's bizarre. It's a bizarre statement. And I just, as somebody who was fat the majority of my life, you know, I'm now mid-sized, so still very adjacent to being fat, but there is nothing political about it, really. There's a lot of stuff that's pathological about it. There's a lot of issues. It can definitely shape your worldview in a way that is not good, put it to you that way, especially to get to very, very high sizes. It's very common that people have these other issues, E fall by letter D, etc., because it takes a lot to sustain such a huge size, which is not talked about enough. And yes, that does include for women. It does. It's difficult to be very, very big. You have to eat a lot. You have to really go against your fullness cues. You have to do these types of things. Now, if you have some hormonal issues going on, that can be a different case, but that type of gain is usually a lot slower over a longer period of time. And typically, if you can get treatment, then you deal with it and then it's done. And you would just be okay with getting treatment. A lot of people have toxic ritualistic issues as a comorbidity with hormone issues. That's actually very common, as the issue within itself can cause hormone issues, primarily hypothyroidism through abuse of the body's system, and metabolic system. The point being, yes, somebody being extremely fat can affect their worldview, but it will not be in a political way. It may affect their politics, but it's not going to be in a political way. How would it affect their politics? Maybe they would be hyperreactive about it. Maybe they could be more vulnerable to cult-like beliefs. Maybe they're going to have less critical thinking skills because they're caught in a toxic ritualistic cycle, so they're vulnerable to black and white thinking, similar to what you're pushing. Maybe they would be vulnerable to the type of rhetoric that you're pushing in this video. That's how it would affect, but that can happen anywhere along the political spectrum. Those things are not exclusive to any side, left, right, center, etc. It has nothing to do with any of that. So this is dumb to start with. Let's continue.
Of course, I recognize that most people that are fat, they're not doing that with intention or purpose.
But you're going to give them an intention because you're a supreme goddess of the world, I guess.
They simply are. In the same way that I have brown hair, they are fat.
That's not true. So that's a lie. This is probably something that she just heard from somebody that has an E followed by the letter D, and she's just parroting it because she's just believing a delusion that a person, unfortunately, with this issue is fighting very hard to get themselves to believe and get others to believe. Unfortunately, there is an external aspect of the toxic ritualistic world where you do try to share these beliefs, you do try to project them onto other people. And even if somebody doesn't have these issues, they will parrot the talking points, which is what I think that this person is doing. That's my instinct. I could be wrong. Maybe she does have an issue, but that's what I personally think. That's my opinion.
They simply exist in their bodies as anyone else does. And I know people are going to be like, okay, Chloe, you need to log off Twitter. This is not a crazy thing to say, especially with the influx of pro-Anna.
It is a crazy thing to say, regardless of anything. Another toxic ritualistic issue has nothing to do, it doesn't make a different one any less toxic. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Two things can be bad at once. You're thinking ridiculously black and white. And I don't know if this person does have the issue, but they're talking like they do. But like I said, it's hard to tell because this person has a social media presence. This person is likely saying this type of thing for attention, in my opinion. It's bizarre. I'll put it to you that way.
Pro-ED, you must be skinny, you must be thin content, media, narratives that are being shoved down our throat within our culture right now in 2025.
And are there any narratives, cultural pushes, or anything that are saying that you need to be huge, that being obese is genetic, that you can never change? Do any of those messages count? Do those messages matter? Not to her. But there's many, many, many messages that we should just live life and whatever and not care about our health or not care about these things. Live in the moment. This type of attitude. You can live in the moment a lot shorter than if you had a bit of discipline or if you had a bit of logic. In the case of the toxic ritualistic, typically people with those issues, they don't lack discipline, they lack reality, they lack logic. And that's harsh to say, but it is the truth. You're not thinking realistically, you're not living in reality when you have those issues. But for people who don't have them and who are class 1 obese or whatever, they're probably just being lazy. So why would we encourage that? Why would we pursue anything then? Why are you pursuing social media? Isn't it better to just be lazy? You see how it just doesn't work? It doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense.
If I go on my Instagram Explore page on an account that I use frequently, where I want to look at memes and stuff about movies and stuff that I genuinely enjoy, my Explore page, no matter what I do, is full of people that I will never look like. And it's the same thing.
So if there are people who are hugely fat, would you be just as upset? I have a lot of those people on my algorithm. I wonder why, right? It doesn't exactly take rocket science to see why, but it's like I have a lot of very, very huge people. I have a lot of people on there that I'm never going to be that big. I'm never going to be that big again. But that's supposed to be upsetting. I don't get it. You have to truly see yourself as some kind of weird member of a body collective or something, and it just doesn't work. It does not work. I've seen this a lot. Honestly, I see it a lot in left-wing circles where people try to push this idea that there's no individuation within body shape and size, but then there will be others that talk about body diversity. It's a weird contradiction that happens a lot, and it's bizarre. Are we bodily diverse, or are we a collective of bodies? You kind of have to pick one, because if we're all diverse, then we're all going to look different. If we're all collective, then suddenly it matters who we're around and how big everyone is around us. Now, I will say the toxic ritualistic root of this has to do with the comparison aspect, primarily within BINGE issues. How does that work? I'm fat. I have to check the room and see if I'm the fattest person here so that I can know if I'm safe or not. That becomes a way of life for that person. Now that can be conflated, I guess, with left-wing politics, maybe easier because there's a lot of, no, not exclusively on the left, but there's a lot of more collectivistic ideas on the left. You'd have to look at like the far right to see more collectivistic ideas on the right, but they do also exist. But maybe it's just an easy way for that logic to get mixed up in the brain. I've told you guys a lot, toxic ritualistic logic, it does bleed into other areas of your life. It is a horrible issue. It does not necessarily just stick to this. You have to think of it as like you're looking at glasses or goggles or whatever. You're looking through a toxic ritualistic lens. That's how you're looking at life. So it can affect, I've seen it affect a lot of people's romantic lives drastically. That one's huge. I've seen people become extremely financially delusional within this issue. I've seen a lot of stuff. You know, I even talked about it yesterday in my video that when I was in university, I had the idea that I had to get through university so I could live, which is similar to the idea of I have to become thin so that I can live. It's a similar transfer of logic. The more severe this is, the more areas it can bleed into, which that's where that comes from. So what is not toxically ritualistic? I can look at anybody's body and know that it's not a reflection of mine. That's a non-toxic ritualistic idea because my body is mine and I don't have to compare. The only time you'd have to compare is if you're in a competitive industry where it's very looks-based, like modeling or something like that, or maybe athleticism. But that's not everybody, and I would just really be careful if you're in those industries that it doesn't become something toxically ritualistic, as I've always talked about a very harsh work environment can trigger it. It's enough of a trauma, which again, we don't talk enough about workplace abuse, but that's a different topic for a different day.
On the accounts that I don't use. The idea of being thin is being sold to all of us in one way or another. And so I say that being fat, for example, is an embodied political statement because you are living resistance.
Remember, the idea of being fat is also being sold to you. So that's kind of it's just like throwing a stone into the water. It just splashes and then there's nothing there afterwards.
Against the culture, against this idea that to be valued, to be beautiful.
Against what culture? Is this a culturally unified idea that we have? No. If that were true, then you wouldn't be shaming people very subtly for downsizing. And a lot of people would not experience shaming for choosing to pursue WL. I can't even say the word anymore because of YouTube. I would be able to say the word if we were living in a culturally homogenized society about this idea that it's 100% pushed. It's not. There's a lot of things that advocate against reduction. or that advocate against downsizing. There's a lot of stuff. A lot. You even have YouTube starting to work for it. So you have that institutional support. That's interesting. I see a lot of fat activists going into these medical conferences and going into EFA by the letter D treatment centers, like, and all this stuff, but that's not a push. That's not a cultural push that's happening to the most vulnerable people who are trying to get help. I would say that's a huge cultural push. You see, a lot of these people, they don't understand that there's a world outside of their own mind. I don't know what it is about a lot of people that try to talk about these issues, but they cannot look at the whole picture. And I don't mean that, I'm not talking about anti-FA, I'm talking about FA. Let me just be very clear. You need to be able to look at all the cultural polls if you're going to talk about it. Otherwise, you look dumb, you sound stupid. So when I hear you, I'm like, oh, what a stupid person. That's what I think when I hear you. As Gen Z would say, you're not eating. You're not.
To be seen, to be treated like a normal human being, you must look a certain way. I also want to remind people.
So that, I think that has to do with the conflation of a lot of different issues. That's also more about looks. That can also go more into pretty privilege. A lot of different other aspects that may be worth talking about. But in the case of weight, it's not worth it. I'll put it to you that way. And it's a conflation of weight with other issues that may be worth discussing.
People that your body keeps the score. If you are losing weight in a way that is unhealthy and unnatural to you, it's not just your body itself that is going to suffer, but your brain, your...
So just as if you stay a huge size, your body will suffer and your brain will also suffer, which she's mysteriously not going to point out. I agree that losing in a toxically ritualistic way, it will create problems for you. And for most of you guys that are on the channel or, that are watching or whatever, maybe not most, but I don't know. I don't know what the breakdown is. People who struggle with BINGE, what's going to end up happening if you try to lose toxically ritualistically, I got to work on that, but you're going to end up BINGing. That's what's going to happen. If I were to do that, if I were to be like, I'm just going to do whatever, I can't even say it. What would happen is eventually a BINGE would follow and I would end up upsizing. And that's what happens. It's a pattern. It's a pathological pattern. It's well documented, well understood. It's a thing. So I agree. You can't do that. You can't. And obviously, as I've told you guys, I would never, ever support being overly reductive at all. So that kind of goes without saying.
Mind, your mental health, your ability to function as a person, as a friend, as a loved
Yes, and BINGE will also do all those things too.
one. And I emphasize this last point because when you convince women that they have to lose weight, that doesn't just impact their self-esteem. When you tell them that they have to take up less space...
It doesn't have to be a self-esteem issue though. It can be seen very neutrally, very practically, very calmly, which is something that I do advocate for, especially within people who are super morbidly obese and morbidly obese. I do think there does need to be more sensitivity about the issues because people are more sensitive at those sizes. It's a lot going on. Your brain is processing a lot to keep you alive in those states. It's difficult. And we often don't think about how difficult it is to exist in that physical state. But it is very, very difficult on a physical level. And it's very, very taxing to the brain. So people that are not in that state, all I'm saying is you need to understand that you do need to be a little bit sensitive about those issues. What does that mean? It just means don't yell at somebody if they miss a gym day or something like that. Don't hound them or push these things of like, you're not good enough, you're not this, you're not that. Those types of things cut really deep within a very, very big person's brain, especially within weight loss. It is difficult. It's very, very difficult. So it does require some sensitivity. Now, once we get to class 1 obesity and onwards, that's not as true. But I still would never advocate for body shaming because it can be triggering. And you don't always know where somebody is. So you don't want to mistakenly trigger something. And it isn't really necessary. Now, saying that you should do more or you're being lazy or these types of things that can be motivating at those stages, in my opinion. So it does require some thought. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And that's what we need to understand.
Space. They literally do take up less space. And what do I mean by that?
Okay, well that is just, I just can't even. I'm cringed out at that. I just can't.
It won't just make your body and mind weaker. It'll make you weaker as a whole.
Just as being drastically overweight, super morbidly obese will also make you weaker. Also, what is this idea that you have to be extremely thin versus super fat? Like, it's just weird. Like, there's a whole gray area in between. It's bizarre.
It'll prevent you from reaching your fullest potential. It'll keep you still. It will demobilize you. It will make you more vulnerable. If you can only focus.
I think that if you are very unhealthy physically and very unwell, even if it is a super morbidly obese level, you will also struggle with effectively pursuing political goals or really any goals, anything, especially unnecessarily. So it is pointless to say this. And again, it makes you sound really, really dumb. Very, very dumb. Because to not acknowledge that being so big that you can barely be there for other people, even on an emotional level, you can barely function on an emotional level due to your size, which it does affect you emotionally. And people hate it when I say that. They can't stand it. Oh my gosh, I'll never forget some of the fat activists. They were so mad when I said that it affects your ability to have empathy because your body is in such a fight or flight state when you're that big. It's really, really hard because your brain is trying to survive. But you want to tell me that not being able to put yourself in another person's shoes very well, that's not a useful skill? You want to tell me that that doesn't help relationships? That's just very emotional. There are so many physical things. They are innumerable. But apparently you're so much stronger if you're super morbidly obese.
Focus on your own vanity and you're malnourished.
And it's only vanity. That's it.
You can't really do much.
You can be malnourished and you can be huge. You can.
Defend yourself, can you? And just enough.
You're not going to be able to defend yourself as well If you're really huge, you can't run and stuff. Can't run away. Can't fight as effectively either on a physical level. You're not as safe being huge. It is a huge toxic ritualistic idea that to be huge in that way is to be safe. It isn't true. It is a lie.
Another reminder, fatal mental illness. You should strive to be healthy.
Well, if we look at B followed by letter E followed by D, B-I-N-G-E, it is drastically more prevalent. And it also matters. I will never say that that doesn't matter, but I will say it's not the only thing that matters. Especially not in regards to the toxic ritualistic world. Especially when you have so many more people that have B-I-N-G-E issues.
And strong. And yes, there are plenty of women that are naturally thin. I know that. But if that's not the case for you, don't harm yourself trying to look like that.
It's not true. Naturally thin, naturally fat doesn't exist.
Whip out your woke card.
That's just a virtue signal. So, anyways, you guys, thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I will talk to you guys again tomorrow. Have a good one. Peace.